Amsterdam, 1965. Ajax are drifting. The club is unstable, inconsistent, lacking identity. On the pitch, they sit dangerously close to the bottom of the league. Off the pitch, there is tension, noise, uncertainty. Into that environment steps a 17-year-old Johan Cruyff. Skinny, sharp, street smart. He grew up in Bettendorp, playing on concrete, improvising in tight spaces, learning to read chaos before he learned to follow instruction. In My Turn, he wrote, "I trained 3 to 4 hours a week at Ajax, but the rest of the time I was playing on the street. The street gave him instinct, but instinct wasn't enough for him. He asked questions. Why stay wide? Why not drift? Why can't we rotate? Why does the defender get to stand still while I have to stay in my lane?" In another era, those questions would have been shut down. Because questions slow training. Questions blur authority. Questions make a coach vulnerable. But the man who arrived to coach Ajax in 1965 wasn't afraid of questions. His name was Rinus Michels. Michels was strict, no-nonsense, demanding. He imposed order immediately. Forest runs, fitness sessions, discipline without exception. Early on, Cruyff tested him. During brutal forest runs, he pushed the boundaries. Michels saw it and punished him. No favoritism, no special treatment. This wasn't indulgence, this was structure. But when Cruyff questioned movement, positioning, structure, Michels didn't silence him. He challenged him. Explain it. If you move there, what happens next? If he follows you, what opens? If he doesn't, what advantage do you create? That's where the partnership formed, not in praise, in pressure. Cruyff later admitted those exchanges were uncomfortable, because once you are asked to explain your ideas, you can't hide behind talent. You must understand consequence. You must see the second movement, the third, the ripple. Sometimes Michels wouldn't correct a mistake at all. He would let it happen again. Let the discomfort build. Then afterward, what did you see? Why did that space disappear? Cruyff said the silence after an error lingered longer than any shout. That silence forced him to think. And that thinking changed him. He stopped seeing himself as a winger. He started seeing the entire field. He began forming principles. If we have the ball, they cannot score. It sounds simple, but simplicity at that level requires structure, awareness, fitness, trust. Years later, Cruyff would say, "Football is simple, but it is difficult to play simple." That difficulty became the foundation of what the world would call total football. But here's the part most people forget. It almost collapsed. In 1969, Ajax reached the European Cup final against AC Milan. This was the test. Total football on the big stage. Ajax dominated possession, they moved beautifully, they controlled rhythm, and they lost 4-1. For all the beauty, they looked exposed. For all the ideas, they looked naive. The revolution suddenly felt fragile. Milan's Catenaccio exposed gaps. Space left open during rotations. Moments of imbalance punished instantly. Critics attacked. Reckless, naive, romantic. Michels had a choice. Pull back, protect his job, simplify the system, blame youth. Instead, he refined. Not less freedom, more discipline inside the freedom. More understanding. After that defeat, Cruyff could have blamed tactics. He could have blamed experience. Instead, he looked inward. He realized something critical. Freedom without precision is chaos. Total football wasn't about movement for movement's sake. It was about timing, about balance, about knowing exactly when to step forward and when to hold. That loss hardened the philosophy. It forced refinement, and refinement is what separates romantic ideas from enduring systems. Because if Michels retreats there, football history changes. He didn't. He doubled down. But doubling down didn't mean chaos, it meant refinement. The rotations became sharper, the pressing became synchronized. When a fullback stepped forward, someone filled the gap instantly. When possession was lost, the team compressed the space together instead of scrambling individually. The freedom was still there, but now it had boundaries. Cruyff wasn't just drifting anymore. He was orchestrating. The movement wasn't reactive, it was coordinated. The risk that once exposed them in 1969 became pressure applied with precision. That's when it changed. That's when opponents stopped finding easy counters. That's when the fluidity stopped looking romantic and started looking inevitable. And then it clicked. Ajax won the European Cup in 1971, then again in 1972, then again in 1973. 3 consecutive European championships, not a surprise run, a sustained transformation. Michels left after the first title to join FC Barcelona. The philosophy didn't collapse because it wasn't built on his voice. It was embedded in the player's intelligence. What made this model different from most tactical revolutions is that it did not rely on surprise. Most systems win briefly because opponents have not adapted yet, but once studied, they fade. Total football didn't fade because it wasn't dependent on patterns. It was dependent on perception. Players weren't memorizing movements. They were learning how to interpret triggers, when to press, when to rotate, when to hold. That distinction matters. A pattern can be decoded. Understanding cannot be erased so easily. That's why the ideas survived beyond Ajax. They were portable. They worked in different leagues, under different managers, with different personalities, because they lived in thinking, not diagrams. That's the difference between a tactic and a revolution. Then came 1974. The Dutch national football team arrived at the World Cup. Cruyff as captain, Michels on the sideline. They pressed high, they rotated relentlessly, they turned the field into geometry. In the final against West Germany, the Dutch scored before the Germans even touched the ball. 14 passes, so brutal. They lost 2-1. On paper they failed, but something extraordinary happened afterward. Europe didn't copy the champions, they copied the Dutch. Coaches across the continent began asking different questions. How do we train awareness? How do we condition players to read triggers instead of wait for instructions? How do we build fitness that supports intelligence? Youth academies shifted, training sessions changed. The ripple was quiet, but it was permanent. The Dutch didn't just play differently, they changed what other coaches believed was possible. Very few teams lose a final and still reshape the sport. That one did. Years later, even Diego Maradona tried to describe what he saw.
I've seen many teams play well. I think the Netherlands in 1974 was incomparable. It was like they were playing without touching the grass. They knew what they wanted to do before even touching the ball. It was like they had eyes in the back of their heads when they played. It was incredible, like a symphony of football.
He wasn't talking about the winners. He was talking about the Dutch. He risked credibility first. He insisted intelligence was non-negotiable. He demanded structure inside freedom. He didn't just support genius, he engineered an environment where genius could survive pressure. Great players often get remembered, great coaches sometimes get debated, but the rarest type of coach is the one who changes the structure of the sport itself. Michels didn't just win matches, he altered expectations. He made intelligence mandatory. He proved that collective understanding could overpower rigid structure. That shift is harder to measure than a trophy, but it lasts longer. When Cruyff returned to Barcelona as manager in 1988, he extended something inherited. La Masia shifted. Young players were taught to interpret space, to think 2 passes ahead, to understand the whole before mastering the part. Barcelona won 4 consecutive league titles. They won their first European Cup in 1992, and from that academy came Pep Guardiola, Xavi, and Andrés Iniesta. Guardiola would later say Cruyff changed his life. But trace the lineage back one step further, Michels changed the conditions. Guardiola didn't invent positional play, he refined an inheritance. The pressure, the build-up from the back, the triangles, the collective intelligence, the DNA runs backwards. To Barcelona, to the Netherlands, to Ajax, to two people arguing on a training ground in Amsterdam. The revolution didn't begin with a trophy, it began with a coach who refused to silence a question. It survived a 4-1 humiliation, it survived a World Cup final defeat, it survived departures, critics, and evolution because it was built on a moment. It was built on understanding. And understanding, once embedded, is almost impossible to reverse. That's why the modern game still echoes with their friction. That's why pressing, rotation, positional play feel normal today. They weren't normal then. Someone had to risk looking wrong first. Michels did, and the game never went back.